Okay, so today I'm going to be showing you a lesson on slavery. So, the last two lessons we were talking about the North and South colonial life,
Okay.
and then we were talking about the social and political views between the North and South and how some of them were causing conflicts.
Okay.
So one of the main conflicts that we are going to be talking about today is, of course, slavery and how it was one of the conflicts that started the Civil War. So, if you may, click on the first video, and it is a brain pop video, and it will give you a little bit of information about the slavery in the Civil War era.
Mhm.
What? Shh. I'm working on my report for Mrs. Baxter. Why? Dear Tim and Moby, I want to know about the history of slavery in America. From Dwight. Unfortunately, slavery's history goes back to way before the United States even existed. Early records show that people were enslaved thousands of years ago in places like Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. Even the ancient Greeks, the inventors of democracy, used enslaved people as household servants. But in the Americas, slavery was particularly brutal. Spanish and Portuguese conquistadors enslaved the native people who lived in Mexico and South America. Oh, conquistador means conqueror in Spanish. The British and Spanish colonists in North America enslaved native people there, too. But in the British colonies on the East Coast, they quickly shifted to enslaving people from Africa. Beginning in the early 1600s, Africans were used for household help and farm work in North America. And the southern colonies built their whole economy around a slave workforce. They labored growing cotton, indigo, and sugar on large farms called plantations, while northern colonies became more industrial, so they needed far fewer workers. By the end of the 18th century, the African slave trade had stolen millions of people and shipped them to North America. The slave trade was a big international business. In Africa, people were kidnapped and traded to merchants in exchange for European goods. They were then sent to the Americas, where they were forced to work on plantations. The crops they grew were sent back to Europe, where they were sold and manufactured into goods. The system was called the triangular trade, and the leg between Africa and the Americas is known as the Middle Passage. People were chained together and packed like livestock into cargo holds. They often couldn't move at all, not even to go to the bathroom. Many got sick and died. Others tried to starve themselves or jump overboard to escape. Over 15% of the captives perished while on board. For those who survived, the excruciating journey took months. The first stop was the West Indies, islands in the Caribbean. Some enslaved people were kept there as plantation workers. Others were sent to America, where they were sold at auctions. Families were broken up and sold to different planters. Well, back then, many Americans thought that Africans were inferior people. They were judged because their skin was a different color and because they weren't Christians. Greed was a factor too. Free labor made a lot of people very rich. Enslaved workers had no rights at all. Plantation owners could make them work all day without rest, beat them, and even kill them. It was all legal. You said it. But eventually, things did begin to change. In 1808, bringing slaves over from Africa was outlawed. Of course, there were millions of Africans here already, and laws had been passed to make slavery hereditary. That meant any children of enslaved people were enslaved too. So the system actually expanded as generations of children were born into slavery. But by the 1850s, most northern states had outlawed the practice. In 1860, the U.S. fought a civil war over slavery, which brought it to an end. During the war, Abraham Lincoln delivered the Emancipation Proclamation. He declared that all enslaved people in Confederate states were now free. And the 13th Amendment to the Constitution officially outlawed slavery in 1865. But the effects of slavery didn't end overnight. African Americans were treated as second-class citizens for the next 100 years. The civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s made huge strides toward righting those injustices. Since then, we've made a lot of progress, though we still have a way to go. It's up to all of us to work toward a society that treats people fairly, no matter our race or background. We're all just people, you know? You're people too.
Okay, and then now for the next BrainPop video is going to be about the Underground Railroad. Can you tell me what you know about the Underground Railroad?
I know that it's not underground, but nor was it a railroad. Yeah.
And then also our last lesson, we were talking about several important people throughout the Civil War and also throughout the topic of slavery. So in this video, you will be learning a bit more about Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and Sojourner Truth. So definitely keep those three in mind when it comes to our next activity, but you're going to be learning a little bit more of them as well.
Dear Tim and Moby, what can you tell me about the Underground Railroad? Your friend, Bo. Hey, Bo. The Underground Railroad wasn't a subway or anything like that. It was a network of escape routes and hideouts set up during the 19th century. African Americans used it to flee the slave-holding states of the South. The underground part meant that they traveled in complete secrecy. And railroad came from the code language they used in communications, like conductors for the people who helped runaways escape, passengers or baggage for those who were fleeing slavery, and stations for the homes and other places where they'd hide. Tens of thousands of men, most settled in northern states and Canada, while some went west or farther south. Life wasn't easy in a lot of these places. Runaways faced racism just about everywhere they settled, but they had gained their freedom. Some joined groups of abolitionists, people committed to ending slavery. The Quakers, a Christian organization, were some of the earliest abolitionists. One of their central beliefs is that all people are equal. I know, but back in the 1800s, that was a pretty radical idea. It took a broad range of people to get support for the abolitionist cause. Like Frederick Douglass, who'd escaped slavery as a young man. He wrote and spoke with passion about the cruelty of owning human beings. Sojourner Truth, once enslaved herself, was another fearless crusader. When someone threatened to burn down a hall where she was scheduled to talk, she replied, "Then I will speak upon the ashes." White abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison and Henry Ward Beecher were equally passionate. And religious groups besides the Quakers got involved too. All of these people worked tirelessly to end slavery and help runaways build new lives. As the abolitionist movement grew, the Underground Railroad picked up steam. Routes expanded, and new ones opened up heading to Mexico and the Caribbean. The path to freedom often meant going long distances by foot, carrying everything you owned. But people also had to stow away on boats, wagons, and trains. Whatever it took to escape a life of slavery. One man, Henry Box Brown, even shipped himself from Virginia to Pennsylvania. An abolitionist shop owner helped him hide in a wooden cargo box. He spent over a day inside before it was safely reopened in Philadelphia. The journey wasn't easy for anyone and could stretch over 1,000 miles. Passengers avoided main roads and traveled mostly at night. They often had to duck into swamps or forests to avoid being seen and captured. Those who helped them were also at risk. You could be thrown in jail for giving runaways food or shelter. Despite the danger, some folks took on even bigger roles in the Underground Railroad. They personally guided passengers between stations, taking them from one stop to the next. These were the railroad's conductors. The majority were African Americans already living freely in the North. Harriet Tubman is the most well known. She was born into slavery in Maryland, but escaped to Pennsylvania when she was a young woman. Tubman helped more than 100 people make it north. Another important conductor was William Still. He kept detailed records. She was born into slavery in Maryland, but escaped to Pennsylvania when she was a young woman. Tubman helped more than 100 people make it north. Another important conductor was William Still. He kept detailed records of the nearly 650 people he helped save. Still used these stories to publish a book about their experiences. That's one reason we know so much about the Underground Railroad. No, slave owners weren't too happy about losing the people they viewed as their property. They resented Northerners for interfering in their business, and were especially outraged at states that protected runaways. Federal regulations said that any escapees had to be returned. In the eyes of the law, they were like stolen property. But several states passed laws making it illegal to arrest them. Other states gave runaways the right to jury trials and free legal help. Often, juries would refuse to convict, and the men and women would go free. So Southerners pushed the federal government to pass the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850. Anyone in law...
All right, so we just got done watching the two videos. Now we are going to do a little activity. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at 5 pictures, and it's going to be 5 different pictures, and you're going to tell me what is going on in the video, in the picture. How do you think those people feel, and how does the picture make you feel? So there are 9 pages. You can pick 5 photos. So for this page, pick 1 photo. Okay, and then click on the view larger image. And can you tell me from reading it what is going on in the photo?
It's an ad in a New York paper for sale. A likely healthy young Negro wench between 15 and 16 years old. She's been moved to the farming Buffaloes. Sold for want of employee. Inquire at number 81 Will Street, New York. March 30th, 1789.
And if you were during this time reading this in a newspaper, how would you feel?
So this is New York. It's still, 1786, so we're barely even a country. We just passed the Constitution. Shit, if I was considered as a white property owner, male, I got voting rights, and at the time, I guess I could probably go check this out, see what it was, just knowing that's what I would be as an individual at that time. It kind of sucks.
All right, so from looking at this photo, what do you think is going on in the photo?
A gang of slaves journeying to be sold in a southern market.
So I guess that's happening. So from the looks of it, these guys look like there were some hired boys from the southern area, either Mexican or could be Cuban, just by the style of their clothing. Plus they have horses, and those guys were brought over only a couple hundred years ago. Kind of interesting. I guess this would be like an earlier time. I figured, like, as things got worse, everyone was kind of like just chained and shit like that. But then again, it could be artists' depiction, impression. Nonetheless, it's still crazy. It's like really like what you expect with like a cattle run. You know, they were literally herding them like they said it was property.
And from viewing this photo, how does that make you feel?
No, it's kind of fucked up, dude. It sucks. It's really bad. These are times we still need to learn from.